Hello. This video we're going to go over the past seasons, the 2024-2025 season for UBC Quadball. This, I think, is a really great example of a success story of a team that rebuilt, and part of this is just for interest and seeing what they did, see if there's any takeaways for other teams or players, but also just kind of a retrospective on how their season went and how they managed to accomplish this. So, for anyone who doesn't know, going into this past season, UBC was left with 4 players. So, many of their players were graduating and moving on. They were still recovering post-pandemic. And the risk is, of course, when you have that few players, that's not enough to play a game. We've seen other teams where they fall apart and are not able to rebuild. So, a lot of these players also only had 1 year of playing experience. So, the team was founded in 2010. This is a very old team. They've been around for a while. They have managed over the years to become a UBC Thunderbird sports club, so this is good. This means they're an official athletic team of the school, and they also receive some funding. So part of the threat with not being able to rebuild is that they would lose funding, and so that would make it even harder in future years if someone else was trying to rebuild the team. So Isaac actually was gracious enough to speak with me to kind of give me an overview of the season and what they did. Another challenge was he was going to be graduating. So as a leader of the team, there's a risk then if he was not able to recruit and replace that the team would lose valuable leadership that would help them in future years. And that the school had expectation as a Thunderbirds team that they are competitive, so they need to attend nationals. So like I said, 4 players is not enough to even field a team. To manage to pull together all those people and get to nationals would be a challenge. So they also survived the pandemic. As we saw, sports had to stop playing. That lost valuable time for players to play and learn and build leadership experience. So in addition to the renaming of Quadball, so the sport used to be called Quidditch. With the name Quadball, that's also just rebranding and another challenge. And spoiler alert, they did manage to bring a roster of 19 players to nationals in Ottawa. So UBC is a very prestigious university. It's very well known. It is based in Vancouver, British Columbia. Nationals is in Ottawa, so almost the other side of the country. You're going to need flights. This is a big challenge not only to build your roster, to actually get those players to nationals and to the highest level of competition in the country. So here's how they did it. So the first thing is that leadership group, those 4 returning players had planned in August for the season, and this is kind of what their season looked like or what they were going to try and accomplish. The big focus was on recruitment for that first month. So they have something called Jumpstart, which is freshman move-in week. There's also Imagine Day. So it kind of sounds like orientation or O week, but it's that first week of classes. They really plan to be present at those events and promoting their sport and their team, specifically promoting tryouts, that they had tryouts for the Quadball team. Then mid-break, there is a break in school. For October, they would attend regionals in November. So this is a road trip to Vernon, BC, in the same province that they are in. Then they plan to not have any practices during exams or the December break. In the new year, plan was to resume practice and then end the season with nationals. So nationals was taking place in March and then have no practices during the summer. So it's a really good idea for team leadership to plan before the school year starts. Many teams will plan even before August, but over the summer especially, to try and map out what do you want your year to look like, what obstacles or what financial needs will happen over the year, just gives you a really good chance of being able to prepare and be ready for what your team is going to face. So as we mentioned, the school does support the UBC team, including financially. So Isaac acknowledged that this is a really big support, and not all teams have this support. Being a recognized team, UBC does not do their recruiting or strategizing. That is on the student leadership, but they support them in other ways. And talking to Isaac, I kind of understood it as 2 different ways. So one is giving space for advertising, having that dedicated campus space that first week of classes to set up hoops, talk to passing students, promote their tryout, promote their actual team is really important. If you're not an official school group or not an official team, you can't do that. And also they have a website, so I'll go over that in a second. The other way the school supports them is with financial support. So the one thing which is really big, they were able to get $6,000 this season towards nationals travel. Now, something that was mentioned was this is not a guaranteed amount every year. The amount changes depending on where nationals is. So we can expect that if nationals was in Vancouver, they would not have gotten this money. But because they're going to have to fly, it's a really big cost, and it's really nice to see that the school is able to support them in getting there. The other thing is the school actually pays for a coach for the quadball team. So we'll get into that in a minute, but I thought that was a really nice way of supporting the team. And then they also have a fundraising match of up to $1,000. So what this means is if the quadball team does fundraising, let's say they sell t-shirts or do cupcakes or whatever, if they raise, let's say $500, the school will match that and give them an additional $500. If they raise $1,500, the school's only going to give them $1,000. So I thought this was a really nice way to support the team, but also give them an incentive to fundraise as well. And then there's also a work fundraising option, which we will talk about in a moment. So this is an example of a school that's really supporting their team in several ways, which I think really was valuable this year in their recruitment efforts. So this is the website. So if a student is going to UBC, before they've even stepped foot on campus, before they've had a chance to encounter the quadball team promoting their tryouts, if a player is going to school and they're athletic, they want to be on a team, they're probably going to check out the UBC Recreation website, and Quadball is listed there. So there's a little overview, there's some pictures, there's contact information. So this is awesome. It gives a chance that you might even be on a student's radar before they've even encountered you in person. So how did they do recruitment? They had their hoop set up on campus to promote tryouts. It sounded like this was in a good location, maybe some good traffic that people are going to be passing by. And they noticed that many clubs and companies are giving students free items to catch their attention. So this year they tried giving out full-size chocolate bars. So this is unusual. Most teams are not giving out this kind of food, but they bought Purdy's fundraising chocolate bars, not to fundraise, but to just get bulk chocolate bars at a good price, and handed them out. So it did sound like students need to engage to get this. Like they had to hear their elevator pitch about the sports team, about tryouts, maybe toss the ball into the hoops. That there was a little bit of engagement, but this is something I have heard from multiple teams is that students do seem to react well to free food. It does seem to work as a lure that you can get their attention, maybe get them to try a drill or listen to you for a brief moment to at least hear your elevator pitch on what your team is and what you're offering. So Isaac also mentioned that this was something that came up later in the season, that it was a very memorable freebie, that people talked about it a lot. So I mean, it sounds like they know their market. They had a goal of just getting that attention, right? Like you're if people are passing by, a lot of people are going to be shy. They're not necessarily going to want to try a drill or give you the time of day, and so the reason why a lot of teams give something out is just to get that moment to make your impression. So this promotion area, they typically had between 1 to 3 people working in that area. And Isaac said that when they only had one person, it wasn't necessarily the skills of that individual person, but they had a lot less engagement when it was only one person versus if it was 2 or 3. So we don't totally know why that is. One of the theories Isaac had was if students are looking for a community or a group to join, if you're a booth with multiple people, you're just giving off the vibes that you're already a community. Whereas one person doesn't really give off maybe the energy or the appearance of what people are trying to join. I'm not sure, but it does seem to help if you have at least 2 people for a promotion or a booth or something to promote your sport. And also, Isaac mentioned that they believe that you need to expose people to your sport many times before they will consider trying out. I think this is a common thing in branding that, to run one advertisement or for people to see your product one time is not enough for them to really consider it or even remember it. You have to kind of be exposed to it multiple times before they will even consider or remember your brand enough. So they did try to participate in every event, everything that they could to increase that number of times that they were exposed to students. And the results, around 50 people came to tryouts, which is great. That's a really good number. So for context, anyone who knows 21 is about your number that you want for a roster. So that gives you plenty. And they managed to retain about 30% of those people who came out to be rostered on the team for the season. So they did have to make cuts at that tryout. So what was communicated to these people about tryouts? Like, what did they think they were getting involved in? So one thing that Isaac mentioned was they did specifically call it tryouts and not just come to practice. So they were trying to communicate to people a commitment that you need to be committed to the team. It's not just enough to be a good athlete. We're looking for commitment. We're looking for dedication on the team. And like I said earlier, he said a lot of students are looking for community, and they're communicating like this is a community that will be here for the school year. So they were upfront about regionals and nationals, the dates that you're expected to attend if you make the team, you're expected to come to practice. And he does think that this forwardness might have scared a couple people away, but the people who did come out were committed. They understood, and that translated later in the season that they were good at attending practice and not flaking on the team, which is really great to hear. So many UBC students are career focused, and Isaac mentioned that they would bring up potential leadership opportunities during those recruitment pop ups. So, a lot of students, maybe it's hard to justify taking time every week to go to a practice. You know, they're going to UBC, they're spending this money to try and build their career. And so, mentioning those opportunities, some recruits did seem to be interested in having something that they could bring up in a future job interview or put on a resume that they could had they could join leading this team. They could maybe get a position. They could support inclusive opportunities that maybe an employer would see as a transferable experience later on. I'd be really interested in hearing from players about certain things that appealed to them, but I guess this is, I don't know if this is unique to their school or their community, but it's good that they at least identify that this was something that maybe some of their recruits were looking for as opposed to just playing a sport. So, who actually joined the team? So, mostly it was new students, it seemed, who were looking for a community. This is pretty common, I think, when people move to a new city or go to a new school. Often they don't have friends or they don't have that built in community. And in those first weeks, they're going to be going to those club fairs or those O weeks or those events where you're looking for a club or a sport or someone to be a part of. Something that they noticed was most of the players had played sports in high school, and for whatever reason, we're not going to be playing that sport at the college level. So I don't know if people didn't make tryouts for other teams, or maybe their sport was just not at the school, or maybe they were just looking for something different. I don't know. But having players who had played sports helps, you're bringing people who are used to being active and practicing and maybe have some experience in that area. So they did find a lot of players who were interested in intramurals were also interested in quadball. And the appeal they had was quadball, as we said, was that Thunderbird Sports Club. So it's seen as a real sport. So even if people didn't necessarily know what quadball was, that kind of endorsement maybe helped them be considered. The social media. So they had a very active social media. From a distance, it definitely looked like people were having fun and making friends on the team. I think this is really appealing for people, maybe in understanding what the sport is before they've even approached the team. But they did a pretty good job, I think, of highlighting the season's activity. So Isaac was not sure how much this helped with recruitment, but he did believe that it helped with retention, that it built awareness of the UBC community, but also some players really enjoyed being a part of creating content or having ideas for themselves. And this is a credit to Micah, who it sounds like managed the social media accounts. I think they had a good balance here. Like on the left, this is the team at Costco showing kind of off-pitch fun activities, but also they had sports related, highlighting good players or tournaments or things that were related directly to the athleticism of the sport and the team. The tryouts in practice. So people were told they could be eliminated, that there's a limited roster. And like I said before, Isaac believed that this did kind of get people to commit and carry through to the season's practice. So once they were on the team, if people missed a practice, Isaac would text those players to ask if they were okay, and then also mention that they noticed they were not at practice. So it's, it's you can't really judge if someone's not there if their reason is valid or not, if they're lying. But I think this does tell people that, your absence was missed and you're also expected to be at practice. We care about you. We want you to be at practice. So I think that's a good thing to do. And Chris was planning the practices as the team coach. So we will talk more about the coach's role in a second. Coach Chris. All right, so Chris is a Vanguard quadball player, not a student, not a player on the team. This is an experienced member of the quadball community who knows the sport and was actually an official coach for the past 2 years for the team, registered with the UBC athletic program. So, like we said earlier, this is something that the school is doing to support their team. I think it's a great idea. It's pretty interesting, but they were not responsible for recruiting players. They're not eliminating players from tryouts. They're not responsible for planning that off-pitch activity. The point is to run that practice and support the team. So I think we see a lot with this sport where someone will get involved, and I think they're taking on too much responsibilities. They're leading the team, they're leading practices, they're leading recruitment, they're doing fundraising. I like that there is this kind of division here, to, that the leadership of the team or those students are not responsible for everything. And so something that Chris mentioned, I appreciate Chris taking the time to talk with me about this, was with the tryouts, they're not saying keep these people, get rid of these people. They're trying to encourage them to make good leadership decisions, but also to develop their own leadership skills. So with the tryouts, it was mentioned, how would you put together a roster? Which of these players are going to play well together, or how are you going to see them play in a tournament? And I think that's really interesting that it wasn't just on the coach to take over and lead it, but also it was like a pillar supporting that leadership of the team. And also, Chris mentioned that coaching UBC was a really rewarding experience and described as the most joyful part of the season this year. So that I thought was really, really nice. It's nice to hear that this wasn't just something they were doing, to be nice, but that they actually got something out of it, which is awesome. So the mentorship role, we have seen this with some teams over the years. It helps take that mental load off of the team and their leadership. And Chris mentioned some people might doubt their own abilities in taking on this role. The job really, you're paying attention to what's happening, give feedback and encouragement, and be a resource about the sport. You don't have to be an expert on every single aspect of the sport. You're really supporting the team. And I think thinking of it that way might take the pressure off of some people if you're thinking of stepping into a role like this to support a team. Because I think it does make a big difference. So as was mentioned, the UBC administration was really focused on student leadership. The goal is not for the coach to take over. They're there to support the team. Right. Oh, wait, let me go back. So something that was mentioned just from talking to Chris about this is for our own community and for Quadball Canada, there might be an opportunity here to connect mentors or people in this role to better learn from each other and support their team and community. All right, so off-pitch activities. So team bonding activities that were not hazing was the goal. They mentioned pretty early on they had this scavenger hunt where they had to sort puzzles and solve riddles to find the rookie party location. They also mentioned, Isaac mentioned this bonding through having a common enemy, which was described as Isaac or team leadership. So I think enemies may be a strong word, but there is something about people having to work together to overcome or to move forward, which does bring people closer. And both Chris and Isaac mentioned that Vancouver weather can be a real challenge, especially when you are practicing outside. They describe this atmospheric river, which is cold and wet. And just hearing about this situation, it sounded like UBC leadership was not sure, so the students, they're not sure if they should have a practice, and Chris is saying, I'll run it if you want to still have it. So it's on those students to decide if they're having it. And when they did do it, afterwards, it sounded like they needed a couple hours at McDonald's to bond and warm up, and that they had, this was a really big bonding moment for their team. So something that was mentioned to Isaac later from some of the players was that people were considering quitting. Like the conditions were hard, but because no one else around them was quitting, they did not. So this is something I would say to maybe other teams. If your leadership or your more experienced players, that their attitude has an impact on those new recruits. So if you're already kind of walking backwards and talking about the weather looks rough, I'm not sure if we're going to do practice, I'm not sure if people will show up, that's kind of giving people an excuse to not show up or to quit. So that activity of your peers does have an impact on those new recruits and if they're going to continue. I will say that we want people to be safe, right? I don't want you to put anyone in a dangerous situation, but there is something about bonding through overcoming challenging situations that strengthens their connection. So, of course, don't violate any code of conduct. Don't risk hypothermia or anything like that. But find that balance between overcoming a reasonable challenge versus putting your players in danger. And then this is also something that Isaac said, that affordability is a cornerstone of how we decide on our team activities. So Costco is one of those things where it's like, how can you feed a team of 19 college kids with $30 and it's a pizza from Costco? That's how the joke started. So anyone who knows the UBC team or has followed them on social media, Costco has made several appearances over the years. It seems like they like going there. They stop there on road trips to tournaments, and it's true. Like they do have a snack bar where there's some pretty cheap food, like the $1.50 hot dog, or you can buy food in bulk for parties and gatherings. So, I wouldn't think of Costco as a trendy, trendy place for the students, but the UBC team seems to have done well with it, and it's nice that they found something for an in-joke, but also as a place to get snacks. And so it was also mentioned that once they hit regionals, it was noticed that the players started organizing their own socials, and it was less on leadership to keep that off-pitch socializing happening. So why do you want off-pitch socializing, or why do you want off-pitch activities? You want people to be friends or at least have a connection. So often if people are having fun or they are now identifying as a part of this group, that helps strengthen their relationship and their commitment to the team. If people are just showing up to practice and no one knows their name and they're not bonding with people, the chance that they're going to keep coming back is very low. So that's why you'll often hear people talk about off-pitch activities or socializing and how that can be an important element of building a team. Finances. So even despite the school's financial support, the team did have to fundraise. So flights, hotels, equipment, road trips, tournament fees, all of this can add up. It's not consistent every year, but there is a considerable amount of cost along with playing a competitive sport like quadball. And the school's funding didn't cover everything, so we just said that. So this is what they charged their players. It was $200 per player to attend regional, so this was driving to Vernon, BC, and then $250 per player to attend national. So just as a reminder, that funding from the school was to help with nationals. So this is still money, right? Like if you are a student and you are probably already taking out loans to go to school, you have limited time to be working because you're supposed to be studying and attending class, it can be hard for students to scrounge up money. So I do appreciate that this is a more, I think, reasonable target for students to attend, but I think it's still something. It's a challenge for people to be able to fund being a student athlete. So the school, it sounded like they also have this concert helper volunteer program, which I thought was very interesting, where they can get paid minimum wage to work at these concert events, but then that money actually goes directly to the team. So this season they were able to raise about $1,000 from this. So that's really cool that that's another opportunity that their school gives them for these student athletes to raise money for their team to allow them to compete. And then they even had to do additional fundraising on top of that to cover the remaining deficit. So we've seen over the years they've sold t-shirts, they've done all the regular things that the teams will do to try and raise money. So I think this year was really successful. Like we said, they had a great job recruiting some great numbers for their team and rebuilding. But there's still some challenges, and I think these will probably continue to be challenges over the years. There might be areas where we can support them, and definitely if you have ideas, I'm interested to see what we can do. But the first one is there's not a lot of teams locally to play against. So Vancouver Vanguards are a local community team. They can play against them, but there is a mismatch in skill level. So with a community team, most of those players have been playing for several years versus UBC where you have people where many of them, it's the first year that they are playing the sport. So you can do scrimmages together, but it's not really an even matchup. The other thing, this is, Isaac said this was their biggest issue, is most students study 4-year programs. And so even if you build up a leader, they're going to graduate and leave. So that turnover is a challenge for leadership and maintaining the team. And I think a lot of teams have that same problem. So in conclusion, this was something that Isaac said, when teams are having fun, they tend to come back. And I think they just did a really good job this year. Like, this is really great to see that they were able to build in such a short time, a roster and attend nationals. Like attending nationals on its own is a challenge for every team, right? But to manage to build like that was a real success story. And it looks like UBC recognized Isaac's work on the right here. He just received an award, so that's really exciting to see him get that recognition. So, like I said, I think this is a good example of not how one person did this, but of how a team, worked really hard, got really far, and that there were several pillars in their community, the coach, the school, that really helped them get to where they were. So I think, I hope you guys found this interesting. I certainly did. Maybe there's some takeaways, but this is a really nice success story, and we're happy for UBC, and we're looking forward to seeing more of them next season in the community.